Hello and welcome back, and today I want to review the brand new Synology DS1621 Plus. It's the latest 6-bay to join their entire portfolio of DiskStation devices and serves as a middle ground between that of some of the 4 and 5-bay disk stations that we've seen, and then more of the heavy business opening the door to enterprise stuff of the 8 bays to 12 bays and higher. This 6-bay solution is presented to you as a kind of mid-range solution. They use the term SMB, small medium business, but also a lot of home users will be interested in a device like this. The growth of popularity in configurations such as RAID 6 have allowed a number of users to be able to have huge amounts of data and still maintain 2 safety nets worth of data, that is 2 drives of redundancy. Now this system not only arrives with RAID configuration options and its own kind of handling of that, but it also has Synology's own Synology hybrid RAID or SIP system already built in. And I know a number of you have been very interested in the Synology platform overall in terms of all of the brands out there because of their software, and I'm pleased to say that this device does support the entire range of Synology software in DSM. And again, is it perfect? No, of course. At this price point, arriving at around £750 to £850 depending on where you're buying in the world, your tax system, wherever you live, and of course whether you're going to put SSD or hard drive media inside. The price point this arrives back for a 6-bay solution gives you a very robust, well-made solution, but it's not going to challenge the likes of the DS1621 XS overall and some of those bigger units as well. This is presented as a solution that gives you a lot of functionality, but it's kind of mid-range solution that will give you support of all of those applications, first and third party, or at the same time, if you're looking for high-end business, you may have to spend a little bit more. So what we're going to do today is we're going to unbox this bad boy. We're going to take a good look at it, see what it has and what it hasn't got. We can talk a little bit about that CPU inside that I know a number of you contacted me about ever since the reveal around about a month ago now. And we're going to talk about who the target audience is and whether you should get this for your data. So let's get it out of the box first before we wrap it on. And yes, this is going to be a long review, guys. Generally these hardware reviews do go on for quite a while, but I will be filming my 5v5 video shortly after this, which will be way more crazy than this. So before we go any further, I know you guys get bored about this. I do like talking about the Synology packaging, and yes, it's a big brown box, and yes, that is super dull, but this is the kind of solution that generally will be purchased via an e-shop, somewhere online, and consequently a lot of brands don't bother doing anything with the external packaging, largely because by the time people see it, they've kind of already spent the money. But this device, I've got to give them credit, and I've harped on about this before. Even though they've got that brown box design that would be very easy to just replicate across the range with sticking a label on it, although there is a label, all of the details on the outside of the box are distinctive to the unit. They relate to this very device. On top of that, there are lots of information about the warranty, which is 3 years, which can be extended to 5 years with the payment of a little add-on there at the beginning. On top of that, lots of information about the ports, the connections and stuff like that, but very little information about the inside. Synology is a brand that likes to keep things as simple as possible for the end user without too much tech speak thrown at them, and kind of this does it for me in this regard. So move that out of there. We've got our accessories and a very large piece of foam, and again I do talk about this in other videos, but please do bear in mind when you do buy a NAS brand that when you receive your unit, try to see just how much attention they've paid to the external packaging, because these are devices that are quite susceptible, I would say, to shock damage in transit, with or without the drive media inside. And any damage that can happen through shock in transit, you're not going to notice on day one, but it's detrimental long term. So again, another tick from me, the fact that they've gone the extra mile in terms of that external packaging on this device. So there's our accessory box. We've got a quick start installation guide, and again it does tell you how to set up the device for the first time, as will I probably in a follow-up video to this, but I've never really been overly keen on Synology kind of adding this little paper detail in here, because it doesn't really tell you anything, and it does direct you, pretty much all the time to go to the online platform, which The online platform probably makes a lot more sense environmentally, I've got to say. You know, it's updated regularly, so it's the most recent information when you've got DSM 6.2 going into 6.7. DSM-7 makes a lot of sense, I'll grant you. But there are some regions in the world where they get lovely paper manuals for these things. And again, earlier this year when I was talking about some of the Japanese versions of these devices, they get whole books detailing it. And I know it seems silly, but a lot of the time people want the information in paper form. But again, environmental, either way, it could, you know, there's arguments for both sides. Not very good arguments on my side. Here we have two RJ45 cables. This is a Cat5e. This is a 1 GBE enabled NAS, and I know a number of you aren't overly keen on that. And I've got to say, I kind of hoped that this would be the device that would open the door into 2.5 GBE or higher. But it does have 4 LAN ports on the rear, and it does have a PCIe upgrade slot. So, you know, you have potential to upgrade and move forward. And again, 2 cables inside there. We have keys, because the drive media inside here are kept inside spring-loaded and lockable trays. A couple of keys there. And again, when you lock these trays, and we'll talk about it a little more later in the video, but if someone is going to try and steal a drive, the locks on these systems are not hugely robust. They're not metal operated, they're plastic clipped, and they can be broken. So bear in mind that the locking mechanism on a device like this is more about preventing error and drive removal by accident than malicious intent, because it won't really stand up to that. And there's screws there for 2.5-inch media, because 3.5-inch media will go inside with the click and load trays that I'll show you later on. Finally, we've got a UK mains lead. This device does have an internal PSU, so again, no external power brick, and I think you guys have heard me time and time again, I quite like external power bricks. They're way easier to replace, and the PSU is the second most frail part of any NAS. So me personally, having an external power brick, thereby limiting the amount of heat generated inside the device, potential vibration and stuff like that inside, and on top of that, just the ease of replacing it in the event of a dead PSU, which no one's perfect, are they? But again, it's internal PSU, and a number of you would be quite pleased about that. So, got our cables, got our keys, got our screws, got our information there. Let's take a look at the NAS itself. Pop it there. There's a little more in the box, but again, more protection there inside. And it's worth highlighting this device. I know I've kind of half alluded to this on the price, and maybe it's already appeared at the top of the screen, but this again arrives at about $750, $850, depending where you are in the world, which is quite comparable to its predecessor. I mean, again, the device that came before this one, which is still currently available, is the DS1618 Plus, and the 1618 Plus is a very, very good NAS. It features an Intel Atom or an Denverton, depending, wherever you want to refer to it, CPU inside it, and it is very, very similar to this in a number of ways, but it's arguable that there are 2 or 3 things inside this device that set them quite far apart. And given their release schedule of, I think it was just shy of 2.5 years between them, I think there's been a lot of upgrades made inside this device. But they will look very, very similar. And I do, of course, have a comparison video coming soon, but I'll cut that nice and short. If you own the 1618 Plus, you don't need to upgrade, in my opinion. If you don't, and you're looking at them both, get this one. But watch the video if you want. So, remove the bag, have a look inside there. I'm going to take a good look at this 6-bay DiskStation NAS. Now, a number of you may already be aware, Synology kind of has a very good design rhetoric. There you go, this bag doesn't want to play the game. They've got a really good design rhetoric. I think they're very aware of the power of their brand, and they're very aware of what they designed here in these chassis. These are systems that are going to be going in home or business environments, and although they may not be regularly accessed, or when they are accessed it won't be in a point-to-point means like this, they do understand that it has to look a certain way, and the majority of their systems have that very same DiskStation chassis like this one. Now, this 6-bay, the DS1621 Plus, arrives in a metal external chassis, and it features all of the things that we've come to expect from Synology on these devices, such as that lovely side-mounted cooling there based in the Synology logo with a nice mesh panel inside for passive cooling on either side of the device. The front of the device has got multiple LEDs for each of the individual network ports, and a couple of them there for system alerts and system access. If we bring that to the front, we can take a look there, and we can see there that chassis is very, very similar to that of its predecessor and the DS1621 XS Plus. We've got a power button there at the top. No LCD panel. Synology doesn't really go in with real-time LCD panels, and I personally am a little sad about that, because I quite like looking at a device and knowing its IP just at a click of a button, particularly when you have a multiple network device such as this. Yes, you can find out that information over the network, connecting to it remotely via the switch or whatever, but it's so much quicker to be able to just click, there it is. On top of that, when there's alerts, LCD panels can often give you real-time information about the nature of an alert, be it temperature-based, be it drive-based, your RAID, intrusion, stuff like that. So I quite like the idea of an LCD, but I know Synology goes very, very, very heavy in with network and internet-only access, so I never really expected that. So there's our 6 bays there on the front. It's worth highlighting that it doesn't need all 6 bays to be fully populated. You can run this on a single drive if you so choose. There's one of the trays there, and again it supports traditional RAID configurations like RAID 0, RAID 1, RAID 5, RAID 6, RAID 10, RAID 50, RAID 60, but it also supports Synology Hybrid RAID, and that's SHR and SHR2. For those that aren't aware, Synology Hybrid RAID gives you the ability to mix and match drives inside, which you're almost certainly not going to do on day one. On day one, you're either going to fill it partially with drives or fully populate it with the same drive, be it a Seagate Ironwolf or a WD Red or a Toshiba NAS. There are lots of drives out there. But years down the line, you might start running out of space. Years down the line, you might have half populated this and you want to fill it with some more drives. And in that time, the cost of drives has gone down and the total general storage capabilities of hard drive media has gone up. Currently it's 16 to 18 TBs. 2 to 3 years down the line, heaven knows what we're going to be looking at as a minimum for hard drives or SSD. Consequently, the ability to be able to mix SATA media within a system and still get the best output is definitely desirable, and it's one of the main reasons that SHR has been such a boon to Synology. Them and Drobo are 2 of the only brands I know in the NAS sector that have fluid RAID systems like this. So each one of those bays, as mentioned, supports 3.5-inch and 2.5-inch media. If you have a 3.5-inch drive, you can just pop them in. You just put it inside there and the sides come off that tray. If you have a close look, you can see those screw holes there for 2.5-inch media, which means you can install traditional SSDs inside here. And again, you can utilize them for raw storage, or utilize a couple of them for caching, or you can utilize different methods of multiple volumes on top of this system. If you are using a 10 GBE setup, you might be able to run a few SSDs in a RAID and some traditional hard drives and use 10 GBE to get a lot out of it, but you will need to upgrade via this system to do that. The trays themselves are spring loaded. These are plastic tray, but I will say it's a nice high quality tray there. But as mentioned earlier, the locking mechanism is plastic based. So again, if you pull it hard enough, it's going to unlock. It is just for prevention of RAID degradation. If we remove each of those trays, and again, all these drives have LEDs based on them, not just the top, and those LED lights can be adjusted up and down in terms of brightness if you're going to be in close proximity to the device. If we remove all of those there, we can take a close look inside this device. Now on the back there, you can see that main PCB backplane that connects all 6 of the SATA ports. There's no cabling. This is direct SATA connector to the drive for each of them. But what you can also make out there on the side, on the other side I should say, let's see how well you can see that. You see those 2 lipped areas there? They are the NVMe SSD bays inside this device. That's right, as this is part of the newer generation of Synology's, in the Plus series, pretty much all the Plus series devices arrive with NVMe SSD caching bays inside. That means if you utilize an NVMe, generally PCIe Gen 3x4, you are looking at 3,000 to 4,000 megs per second throughput, at least in terms of read. Write, it's going to be a different story inside here for caching. And those SSDs provide tremendous performance and tremendous IOPS heights while lowering latency quite significantly. Of course, they don't have the overall storage capabilities of traditional hard drives with their mechanical parts, but platters and a lower price point. The reason NVMe SSD caching has become so popular is it allows users to leverage a couple of SSDs against a huge array of hard drives. And improve their performance. And again, that performance is only really felt in smaller file types or regularly accessed files, such as in a shared drive. Synology themselves have their own range of SSDs that this device supports, and you can install a couple of those to cache the overall storage storage pool and the volumes therein. But it is worth highlighting you cannot utilize those NVMe bays for raw storage. Synology have been very firm on this, and I know it is an area of contention for a number of you that you cannot utilize those NVMe's for storage. There's lots of arguments for and against, but we won't really go into them here because I've covered them in so much detail in other videos. But it is just something you have to bear in mind. So, on the base of the device, you can make out that USB 3 port there just at the bottom. And again, although it can be utilized for a number of USB accessories, and there are 3 USB ports on this device, I will highlight that that USB port is predominantly utilized for USB backups. There's a dedicated USB tool built into this device for USB copy, which allows you to run a myriad of different backup versions between an external drive and the NAS, and that's both directions. You can run a 1- or 2-way backup between the two devices to regularly back up individual selected folders on the NAS to a USB or vice versa, or a differential backup where you connect the drive and it will automatically back up from a location you've pre-designated, but only back up the changes since the last backup. And then you've got time-managed backups or whole system backups, where it will create a historical tree of backups over time. And again, that's the least desirable one of all of them, I think, is the amount of space utilized. But USB backups, as old hat as they might sound, to me are an important part of a multi-tiered backup strategy, because you've got NAS to cloud, NAS to NAS, and NAS to USB, with numerous tools from Synology in their DSM platform supported on this device. Now, on the base of this system, we've got there that panel, and inside there, that covers the 2 memory slots inside this. This supports SODIMM memory, and that's ECC memory that we're going to go into a little bit more detail later on, but it does have those 2 individual slots all on the base. And we've got even more ventilation in the base of the device, as well as ventilation there, just on the lip there, and in between each of the drives. The passive cooling system of this device, and along with the ones on the side, is very, very important, because drives, and indeed the CPU and memory and all the components inside this device with their own heat sinks, the hotter they get, the less they're going to perform. You need to keep things as cool as possible, and you've got active cooling fans on the rear, drawing air over all of those components, but you need that air to go somewhere. You need that air to work with all of the passive cooling around the system, and therefore maintain that great operational temperature inside. Now, if we look at the rear of this device, we can see those 2 rear fans there, and again, those rear fans can be set for automatic rotation, so they can adjust with the internal temperatures of the device, or they can be increased or decreased manually. I personally recommend not really touching that setting, but it is worth highlighting that if you lower the RPM of those fans, it will lower the noise of the device just the tiniest pinch. It's not it's not the noisiest NAS, but I will say that because this is a metal chassis and a 6-bay, and it's going to generate a little bit of vibration noise, and the more enterprise level drive you use, probably above 8 or 10 TB, they have far more planners and dedicated 7200 RPM, and generally you will find they will be noisier drives. The system can't really do anything about that. The clicks and whirs of the actuator and the arm inside the drive reading those platters like crazy, but just bear that in mind. So yes, you can lower the fan noise, but 1, I wouldn't advise it because it will lower your performance almost certainly, and 2, the main noise doesn't come from the fans, it comes from the drives vibrating throughout the system. Going back to that rear there, we can see that power point there for the internal PSU. There is our 2 more USB 3 ports there, and again, those are USB 3 5 gigabits per second, and I will say and remind you once again, these cannot be used for direct access. A number of you do still ask about connecting a NAS via USB to your PC or Mac system. It's not going to work. The relationship between the connected device on that USB port and the NAS is very different, with the NAS acting as the host and the connected device acting as the client. USB protocol on a PC or Mac system works the other way around, and that is why you cannot communicate with this NAS with that USB port. The direction of the language just isn't going to work for you. But there are numerous peripherals that can be connected to a Synology NAS, from wireless dongles, with few of them being supported if I'm honest, but also you have got some network adapters, and you've got UPSs, and making non-network appliances such as printers and scanners and stuff, making them network accessible. You can even assign these USB ports to a virtual machine inside the device, which I recommend. Next to this, we have 4 1GBE LAN ports, all of them using copper, RJ45 1GBE, and they can be link aggregated or port trunked to combine them. That means that each of them will give you 1GBE, and you can connect to multiple different network ports on your switch and have a failover if you like. But a number of users will typically use those for link aggregation to turn 100 megabytes per second or so to 200 megabytes per second or so to 300 to 400, so on and so forth. But this PCIe slot here on the end, PCIe Gen 3 times 8, so again that means that you can upgrade this device with 10 GBE, dual 10 GBE, because the CPU inside this device does support it. On top of that, you can add an SSD cache card, but it's worth highlighting that again, you've already got 2 NVMe's inside. Now, very much now, 6 bays is going to give you the kind of raw throughput in your storage pool that you're going to need that many NVMe cache bays. But I do recommend looking into plus gigabit connections for this. And there are a few other third-party cards from companies like Intel and Mellanox that go up to 20, 25 and 40 GBE. And we're hoping to do a test on this, but remember, you have only got 6 hard drive bays inside this. So even an enterprise level hard drive that promises 2 to 250 megabytes per second typical, if you have even a decent RAID 0, which I would not advise on this, each added drive will only really give you 120 to 150 megabytes per second increase with each drive. So even enterprise level drives, you're going to cap out at 1000 megs anyway without SSD utilization. So look into 10 GBE, but I think that's about your option on this. I wouldn't go higher than that because I don't think this is a system that can give you that. But there are ways and means, one of which is thanks to those eSATA ports. There are 2 expandable eSATA ports on this device that allow you to add 5 drives to each of them with a DX517 from Synology, which is about 350 to 400 quid, give or take. And each one of those connected via eSATA 6 gigabit will allow you to bolt on another 5 to 10 drives of storage to the existing 6 bays inside this device. Now, in that scenario, you might do very well to get an upgraded card beyond this, but if you are already looking at that amount of storage on day one, I don't advise going for a 6 bay. I think you should go bigger early doors. And that's really it for the ports and connections on this device. There are things that I quite like about it in terms of physicality on the external. I like the chassis. I've always liked the chassis. I kind of wish there was an LCD, but that's just my problem. Maybe higher than 1 GBE would have been nice, but again, where that sits in the price point and the fact that this device arriving again $750, $850, and then you've got like the device behind me, the 1621, arriving around 400 to 500 quid more, and that's a 10 GBE Xeon NAS. You've got to find its place in a portfolio, so you kind of see where Synology have gone for the price point on this and try to put as much as they can into that price point while still maintaining DSM to a very high level and still giving you hardware that can support DSM to the highest degree at that price point it can. Now, that's pretty much it for the external on this. Let's talk a little bit about the internal hardware on this. This device arrives with a great CPU inside there. It's an AMD Ryzen-based CPU. It's the V1500B. It's a quad-core 2.2 gigahertz processor there, and it supports ECC DDR4 memory. Now, it arrives with 4 gig. It can be upgraded all the way to 32 gig with a couple of official 16 gig sticks inside. Keyword there, official. Synology aren't overly keen on third-party memory because they find it difficult to support people on an unsupported configuration. So again, they do maintain that you should utilize their own memory inside this device. I will say that CPU, we haven't had a chance to fully test it yet. I've only just got this here for the review. This is fresh to my eyes as it is to yours, and we will be doing software overview, performance comparisons, with that of its predecessor, and of course the higher unit over there. We will be doing 10 GBE tests as well, which I'm quite looking forward to. But I will say for that CPU that it is a far cry higher than what we saw in its predecessor in that Atom Devaton. And again, as I mentioned in the reveal, the CPU inside this device kind of beats it in a number of ways. It has more threads, it has more PCIe lanes overall, it has a higher clock speed, can handle more and better instructions overall with that CPU. And that Ryzen, although it isn't technically like a fully fledged Ryzen 357 favouring more of an embedded SoC, I will say it's still a great jump from that of the Atom that came previous, the C3538. So we will be finding out more about the capabilities of that CPU in a general access sense with things like Plex, Surveillance, 10 GBE, and how it sits compared with the other units around it in the family. But for now, got to say I'm quite pleased with that CPU. Could it be improved? Of course. The fact that it doesn't have embedded graphics is a real shame. But I will give Synology a little bit of a benefit of the doubt on that, because this product in this family line, and again I am talking like the 8 bays, like the 1819, the 1618, the 2419, in between a lot of the units that have Celeron processors, and then above it you have system with Xeons. There's been this area in the middle that's always had Atom and Denvaton based processors, and they don't have embedded graphics for the most part. So the result is that I wouldn't have expected an embedded GPU, CPU on this anyway. So as much as I would have liked to have seen something a little bit more on, if you talk about AMD, there's some of the Radeon powered stuff, it's still good to see this CPU, and I do think it's a suitable upgrade over the Atom while still maintaining that price point. Now, what do that CPU and that memory bring to the table in DSM? Well, first and foremost, it arrives with the support of the entire Synology DSM software catalog. We are talking the collaboration suite, all of that stuff about Office, Drive, Chat, Calendar, all of those applications. Then you've got Moments, soon to be Synology Photos, Photo Station, Video Station, Music Station. Then you've got some of the more business-led backup tools, Active Backup Suite, Hyper Backup. These tools that allow you to create a very, very detailed backup strategy. And then you've got support of Synology C2 in a number of ways, in 6.2 as a backup medium, but then you've got hybrid share in DSM7 coming soon that will allow you to get that cloud storage with the appearance of localized storage with intelligent caching in the background. Synology Drive brings a lot of intelligent background caching and file pinning thanks to Office 365 collaborations, and hopefully in 2021 we will be seeing a lot of those features being integrated into OS X, because I know a number of Mac users who use the Synology client apps are still waiting for it, they're still there. In terms of third-party integration, there is, I'm looking forward to testing Plex on this, but I think it will still outperform Plex on its predecessor. But how far it beats the likes of the embedded Celerons, some of those Pentiums and stuff we've seen before, even the Xeons that don't have GPU but raw power behind them, it'll be interesting to see how this performs. But I will say 1080p should be fine on this. 4K though, the jury's out at this time. Now, in terms of Synology apps, other target software on this that people may be buying it for: Surveillance Station. You've got your 2 licenses, supports up to 40 cameras, yum yum. It also arrives with support of the VM platform, Synology Virtual Machine Manager, which I know comes as very, very good news to a number of you, because this device has that very much a target. This series, this family from Synology has always had virtualization and virtual machine deployment very much at the front lines, and this device carries on in that vein. Now, what we really need to wonder about this device now for the future is, one, is this CPU going to become the cornerstone of the majority of those family units? The RS8 21 or 22, whatever it calls itself, the 12-bay half-depth version. Synology makes a real conscious effort when it comes to introducing new hardware values into their product portfolio range, that CPU or that memory CPU chipset combination, they eke as much out of it as they can for for DSM, and as the years go by they get more and more out of that hardware. We've seen it with the Atoms, we've seen it with the Celerons previous, and now we're going to see it with this, I hope. So it'll be interesting to see, one, how often we see this architecture appear on those other units below and above it, and moreover, what can Synology do with this new architecture. But I'm going to get things set up now for some software testing of this device here for YouTube. In terms of hardware, I'm pleased with this device. I would recommend it, as mentioned at the top of the video, if you are an existing 1618 plus user. I'm not sure I would recommend a full upgrade to this right now. If you are looking to upgrade, I'd say go for something a little bit bigger, or maybe this bad boy right here, the 1621 XS. If you are looking at a brand new 6-bay and you've got a budget of maybe £1,000 to 1,500 quid, including storage media, you could do a lot worse than this. I think this is a very, very good NAS for that, and it definitely delivers a lot of what Synology promise in DSM, and at the same time, not exactly kill the wallet. But do you agree? Let me know. If you enjoyed this video, click like. If you want to learn more, click subscribe. Do visit the links in the description to NAS Compares to find out more about this device. We've got the full written hardware review of this and more comparisons between this and other like-priced devices that have been released before or at the same time. Thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time.